Hey Jen, you have to accept the invite if you want to come in. Um, I'm gonna put it out there so people can come in and ask you questions, and I'm recording it too. So we'll see where this goes. How you doing today? Doing all right?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sweet. Yeah, I've had a couple of issues with talking to people on Discord where my audio will just please stop. Okay. Hopefully that won't happen, but if it does, it's just usually a matter of rejoining.
Okay. Give me
Just to let
once.
you know. Did I just call you naturalistic pantheism, or do you have a different name, people?
Everyone calls me Frank because that's my name. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, Frank.
yeah. If you look on my my DMs, it's just Franks92. So people just call me Frank.
I see. That's cool. So, how long you been following T Jump?
About 2, 3 years now, something like that.
He's fun, eh?
Yeah, he's good.
Love
I
debates.
I don't agree with everything he says, but most of it I definitely agree with. You know.
Just like the debate vibe, to be honest. Like, it's just about not even really about agreeing to me. It's about like the arguments themselves on their own merits. Before I started doing this, I was doing like logic diagrams. So
What's that?
it's basically like Venn diagrams that are meant to sort of basically facilitate logic. So like, you know how you have the precepts?
Yes.
But I'm not talking about Christian precepts. I'm talking about general making presuppositions about the things that you.
Right, right. Yes. Yeah,
So it's like one layer of presuppositions, then another layer, then another layer, then another layer, and then eventually getting to conclusions based on progressive presupposition. That's sort of, it's not a very good. It looks like somebody showed up in the audience.
yeah, people will start showing up. Just give it some time.
It's hilarious. Like I never called myself a pantheist before I debated T Jump, so he's the reason why I am now a pantheist, I guess.
Right.
Ironically.
Well, I'm gonna ask you some questions if we don't get too many people in here, and you just answer them, and then we'll just go from there. So sometimes the stage fills up. I know you've been here for some of them, so but we do get trolls. So
Don't worry about it. That's totally fine. I appreciate the chance to talk, and I'm sure that if any bad actors come on, we'll just get rid of them just as quickly. So I heard a couple of them yesterday. They seemed rather quickly booted out.
mm-hmm. I deal with them really quick.
Nice. Yeah, do you want to wait a few minutes before some people show up, or it's up to you? Like I can.
Yeah,
I'm easy going.
let's just wait a couple minutes. I mean, we have one person listening right now, but um, let's see if anyone else wants to join in. And then see that the only problem is I shouldn't have started it because PNR politics and religion usually does a stage right, and then they'll dominate the uh, the people that are actually trying to like, how do I explain? Like they'll like have more people watching their stuff than ours, so more people will go over there. So I don't know if that's the reason people aren't showing up, because like usually we get a whole bunch of people coming in. Um, Maybe it's the title. I don't know. We'll see.
You could retitle it.
What should I title it?
I don't know, something more inflammatory.
What do you think? Give me some suggestions.
Step right up to get proven wrong by the person who knows everything. That's probably pretty inflammatory. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think you should say that.
That's a good one.
Step right up and come on down, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a live one on our hands.
Oh man! By the way, I really like your periodic table. I seen that on the
Oh my god! Thank you so much.
yeah, it's pretty cool. How did you make that, by the way?
It was revealed to me. I spent, a lot of years sort of contemplating my beliefs and what might be the best way to convey them to other people. And, eventually that periodic table just sort of popped into my head. I mean, obviously, after a long period of contemplation and having studied chemistry, physics, math, etc., many years after that, it just sort of just popped in. It's
All
kind
right,
of how it works.
so okay, going
People
down that
don't always realize that.
route, what have you studied? Are you a professional physicist? Are you a what's your degree, your background?
I have a physics math degree. I spent 8 years working for the RCMP. I don't know if you know who they are.
What's that?
Canadian FBI. They're like the guys on the horses. Obviously, I didn't ride a horse, but Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I was a video analyst there. So that was like, trying to figure out if 2 recordings was the same person talking or 2 videos, treatment of evidence court. That was good, and also as an interpreter for deaf people in university. So that would be like just typing what the professor says in the class for people who couldn't hear or had trouble hearing. And yeah. Then I stopped when I got married, and now I do internet debating, aka dumpster fires, full time, I guess.
Jedi Master,
Probably more than full time. I mean, I don't want to say it like it's a job because I'm definitely not getting paid, but I feel like this is the best use of my talents.
Nice.
Time being.
Well,
For
Jedi
asking.
Master's here, so maybe he can ask you a couple questions and we can go from there if he wants.
Jedi Master. Left 9.
Hello. So, when you say pantheism, maybe you want to go into a little bit about what you mean, what your version of pantheism is. I assume it's like more of a consciousness-based pantheism.
Is there such a thing as a non-consciousness-based pantheism, right? It's really just generically universe equals God, or divinity attribute of nature. It's kind of the same thing. So there's really only one correct way to be a pantheist, right? But
well, I guess there's
a lot of different interpretations, and people don't all have a transcendental knowledge of how the universe works. So they may have some limited version of pantheism, but pantheism implies panpsychism.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like, I can understand that. I mean, there are positions that use the term pantheism that aren't that. Like naturalistic pantheism would be the essentially like a non-conscious form of pantheism. That's what Tom cites a lot, and that's what Frank changed his name to over here.
It's kind of like empty. It's meaningless, right? So it's like, you can't just arbitrarily exclude something because you don't want to think about it because it's too complicated, right? Like with consciousness. So it's like naturalistic pantheism implies psychism. So if you want to say you're denying consciousness, but also a pantheist, that's contradiction. But I understand you don't want to identify as an atheist, perhaps because it's an indefensible position, because it's an axiomatic negative. So the naturalistic pantheism is like a way to get around that, but it's still atheism unless you actually go where the implications lead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an atheist. I think that naturalistic pantheism is usually atheistic, although I think the way that the Stanford Encyclopedia defines it, it has ontological commitments that are sanctioned by empirical science, which means like if there was somehow empirical evidence of a god, then naturalistic pantheism, or even like not necessarily a god, but like a universal consciousness or panpsychism, if there was like a scientific way of either verifying or just giving us reason to think that was real, then that would fall under.
Copenhagen interpretation implies panpsychism. So basically, it's like you're trying to say
Copenhagen?
that you would accept evidence, but you really wouldn't accept evidence. You're just saying that so you don't have to change your beliefs.
No.
If you read
I
the
mean,
Copenhagen interpretation, it says observation is waveform reduction or wave function reduction, which is the wrong way to say it, but that's another story. They say observation and collapse of the wave system is the same thing, which implies, again, panpsychism. So it's like, I have no argument against panpsychism, but you want to say, well, no, the universe isn't conscious. It's like this, what I brought up to Tom in the debate that I did with him. You can't axiomatize a negative. You have no way of knowing if you're right. You're wrong.
well, I mean, I
You
don't
especially
think
don't want to axiomatize a negative that's wrong.
I don't think Copenhagen really gives us any like metaphysical commitments about what
Isn't it a list of metaphysical commitments?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a list of like
they're like
relational
pseudo
commitments.
axioms.
Yeah, but they're all relational, so it's taking certain
Relational? What?
Yeah.
Everything's relational, right? So that's doesn't say anything.
I mean, like what? So you're saying you're like a monist, right? So
I suppose it depends what you mean by monist.
well, you talk about a monad, right?
I realize a lot of people don't even understand Platonism, even in the slightest bit, and people think they can debunk Platonism, which is like my head just caved in, and how idiotic that proposition is. It's like, no, you can't disprove Platonism. You can not understand it, but you know what I mean? So if you ask me if I'm a monist, it's like I'm not, in the sense that I think that, well, it really depends what you mean by monist.
No,
So
yeah,
monad,
I mean,
yes, definitely
okay.
a monad.
No,
To
is that
control
like
everything? Yes.
right? So that's not
is
really
that
relational,
sufficient?
right?
Yes, it is. It's the root of all relations. It's the substrate of the relations, the monad. Non-observable, right? So me saying the universe, the observable universe consists of relations, and the monad's non-relational and non-directly observable. Those things are consistent. It's not a thing. It's a metaphysical necessity.
Right. I mean, I'm a monist as well.
How would you
But I would
explain
think
how you feel to people, or what you think to people? That I'll see if I agree.
about that. Okay, so I mean, I'm like a physicalist, but I think that there's a physical substance monad, and that the behavior of which would be described by whatever the actual physical laws are, and then our current physical theories are just attempts to reach whatever those physical laws are, and those physical laws would just be the descriptions of the behavior of the physical substance.
So descriptions are part of the monad?
Well, it has a behavior, right? That's the idea.
Monad's
So
unmoving. Behavior implies movement. Monad's unmoving. So you have to sort of be careful with these transcendent concepts, not to
I don't think it's movement necessarily. Like I'm trying to use a term that's a little bit less spatial or.
For example, something
temporal.
like love. Where does love exist?
Well, see, like love
originate?
could be classed as like a behavior that's not like spatial or temporal necessarily, right? Like, so that's kind of the idea.
You're saying it's monadic. You can just skip to saying it's monadic. It's fine. What you're saying is love is of the monad.
Well, no, I mean, I think, if I got into the details of it, like love would be something that's downstream quite a bit, but
what?
I mean, I'd have to, like I said, I'd have to get into some of the details of it, but I think that at
just
the base,
say something's downstream. Like I don't want people to get confused here. You can't just say something's downstream. It's like downstream from what?
Right. So it's like I think that there's at the fundamental level, there's this physical substance that has a behavior, and that behavior is law-like.
I mean, the unmoved mover, the fact that gravity's always attractive type thing?
No,
that's the monad. It's a definition.
Well, I mean, it's something like, so it's something much deeper than that, where it's like the
there's nothing deeper than the monad. Like you can't arbitrarily divide into.
Well, you're
depths.
saying
like the depths are what they are. You can either
right. You're saying gravity
not.
though, like gravity is
I'm saying that for something to be of the monad, it can't change. Gravity doesn't change. Always gravity. Mass changes because you can break stuff in two. People can get bigger.
But there's things like
mass can change.
hierarchical causal like not necessarily chains would be the wrong word, but
I think chains is
my
the
idea
right
is just
word.
that these things are
Cycles.
like emerging from the behavior of like one substance, basically.
And substance would be emerging also, right? You gotta just be ultra careful with stuff. Like you just have to remember the monad is the best metaphor for the monad is the perfect sphere. It's not observable, but it's clearly conceivable. That's obviously not the entire monad. If this physical realism thing is true, anything in the monad can be reduced or deformed using the sphere.
I mean, I don't even necessarily think you need that, because I mean, so you're kind of starting like it's similar to like amplituhedron, what you're saying, where it's like you're using.
You're not in a position to say what you need, because to know what you need, you'd need to have some type of stance to claim higher knowledge, which you don't have right now. You're not in a position to say need. I am not to be a bitch or anything. I've just had this problem a lot where people seem to think they can tell me how to qualify my own model. It's like science does that.
Well, I just think like metaphysical substance, like monism, like it's usually something that's a little bit more like abstract, quote unquote, meaning like,
which is why it's become completely irrelevant, because it's gone into such abstraction that people have shoehorned bullshit into it, which have made people think, well, fuck, this is stupid garbage, and given it up. So
this is kind of what I'm saying, though. It's like,
less abstract. I mean,
if you have to get everything from it, if you're trying to propose something that you can derive like pretty much everything from, it has to be
not quite. It's not quite. It's a synthesis of processes and procedures. But driving everything. It's about understanding where things exist relative to each other.
Yeah, so that kind of sounds like a process metaphysic, because like so there's like substance metaphysics, and then there's also these like process metaphysics too.
Processes are things.
Sure.
Substances, it's a bit more abstract, right? I would go with processes versus qualities.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I kind of load that into the term behavior when I say that like the substance has a behavior, but
because like, what's the behavior of love? It's nonsensical, right? You have to make sure you get your ordering correct.
I think love is more of a concept. It's like subjective concept, but
it's an unchanging metaphysical absolute of the monad. So you can't change that fact that love is eternal, exists in the monad, and has varying manifestations within the concrete.
How do you get to that idea?
Definitional. Anything that can't have a beginning has to be eternal, even if it seems like it's not, because it's a question of physical necessity. So
what
the universe didn't always exist. My physics would not be logical. There'd be some breakdown. Continuity of causality. But I noticed there's somebody else who's been trying to talk a bit. I don't know how the interview normally goes. So I'm fine for people to take turns or whatever. I see there's 2 mods here, but so just guide me and let me know what how do we go from here?
Yeah, Jen, that's fine. Jedi Master had a couple questions, so I was just letting him go. But if Jedi's done, then JCC can go. That's fine.
Yeah, I was just wanting to interject to ask some questions as the conversation was happening. Jen mentioned that the universe didn't exist prior to what we are knowledgeable about. How does Jen know that the universe did not exist?
I never said that. I said that if there was a beginning to the universe, that would imply the laws of physics don't apply. Since I think the laws of physics do apply, the universe has no beginning. Didn't suggest it had a beginning. I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying infinite things cannot have a beginning. Having a beginning, being finite, is metaphysically the same thing.
So hang on. I got confused. Are you claiming it did not exist at all? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, you said I didn't understand. I'm not claiming the universe didn't exist.
Oh, okay. Okay. Never mind.
My position is uncreated universe. Beginning. It's a contradiction in terms. That's why you get these foolish things like Big Bang, which aren't science. It's theology. Don't make sense. And when people try to explain them, like, you can tell that they're just like not interested and becoming like,
What's your
talk about it?
What's your definition for Big Bang?
Normal one, the one everyone agrees with, who's a scientist.
Well, actually, no. Just any definition that we can use to have a conversation move in a positive direction.
How do we want to go? Well, what would be a positive direction? I don't believe the universe has the beginning. I just told you why. You should realize that there's no chance you're going to change my mind and just be cool with that.
I'm not. Okay. Sorry, that's not my premise. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just asking questions to understand your thought pattern. That's all. So if you're getting defensive, then I think
just saying that you are not in a position to presup that you can understand what I think or how I think, and it is absolutely insane to think that.
Okay, whoa. Where did I do any presumptions?
You just said you were trying to figure out how I think, implying that would be something you would be able to do. It's not. Like, oh, yes, many have tried.
I'm just asking a question to understand, because I actually don't understand.
To presup that asking a question will lead you to understand how I think is erroneous.
That's not what I'm trying to do.
Then this is pointless.
Here, I think what he's trying to get at here is that, like, in the typical Big Bang model, there actually isn't like a beginning to the universe. It just says that the universe was previously in like a more dense, hot state, and that it expanded and cooled over the course of a certain period of time, but it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning of the universe. So
yeah, the Big Bang is the start of the expansion.
Total cop out because of my argument being correct.
No, I'm just saying
they want to cop out, but they want to hold on to the model. Cop out of the fact that
that's
it's
what the model always was.
Okay, yeah, it was always inconsistent, and then they tried to weasel out of it with something that doesn't actually weasel them out of it.
What's inconsistent
and I therefore
about
don't
it?
give a shit.
But it's not changing, though. This is just what it. I mean, it's popularly interpreted in an incorrect way, I guess.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, you gotta understand it.
Like, you got to understand what I'm saying is it's always looked pretty much what it looks like now, and to say anything other than that is literal kookery.
Well, insanity. It just doesn't. It doesn't state that there's a beginning.
So you want to talk about superstition? How much superstition? How much mind knots does it take to believe that everything you see used to be contained down to like a thimble? Is completely dear.
I mean, based on the evidence we have, it seems completely.
It's not based on the evidence, right? It's like you want to tell me that CMB is indicative of the residual energy. I'm going to tell you that is wrong. There are other ways to justify the presence of this. Is predicted any ZPE model. There would be a ZPE, but universal ZPE. Like, come on. So you're telling me you have evidence. So now all of a sudden these people who were just asking questions and aren't really sure are now experts on interpretations of cosmology.
The problem is the
background radiation is interpreted from the evidence. It's not the direct evidence of the expansion of the universe.
It's funny. I have a degree in physics.
Right?
Don't you think I've heard these arguments before? It's not a prediction. You can't make predictions from a singularity, okay?
No,
but
singularity the cosmic
is a defeat of the laws of logic. Now, as logicians, you should know that. If A and not A, then your system's inconsistent.
It's not part of the theory. I mean,
that is. A singularity is a contradiction to the concept of laws of physics. Either laws of physics exist or singularities are possible. We just not get bogged down on Big Bang. This is nothing. This is just going to turn into a big.
Yeah, that's fine. I just don't think. I'm
not going to change my mind. The fact that you think that you can convince me, a person with a degree in physics, about physics and interpretation of physics, means you should really take a look in the mirror.
Okay, hang on.
You can't have it both ways. Either you're an expert or you're not.
This is fun.
Wait, why are you presuming...
towards the Socratic method because it makes people extremely arrogant and condescending. And now I'm going to say
I haven't even got to my
I'm
questions
going to fight
yet,
against
so
this idiotic, non-traditional modality of hair splitting.
why are you so defensive, Jen?
Yeah, I wonder, because people are, quote, claiming to ask me questions and then claiming that I'm making logical fallacies that they don't know the first thing about, and then claiming that they've debunked
Who here said you were committing a
thousands-year-old
fallacy?
tradition. It's like, would you be offended if you knew something and people kept trying to flip you
I
off
think you're
for it?
implying a bunch of things. No one here said you're committing a fallacy.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you more questions about monism because this is a conversation I've heard of it. So I Googled it and I'm interested. So
Right, then
by
how
me
about
asking,
let's all make a vow for the
by
remainder
me-
of this conversation not to use the term logical fallacy. Okay?
I never
That's
did.
It's okay
fine.
to say
And
I
I'm
don't understand.
Guys,
It's okay to
guys,
say I don't
chat.
get it, but it's not okay to say that's a logical fallacy. It's like it's not. I'm
All
gonna
right.
fucking tell you what the
Then
logical
what's
fallacies
saying
are.
it? No one else said it but you.
All right,
Yeah, you're the
guys,
one
guys.
Had
All
a
right,
lot of these conversations
No
before.
more-
I'm just
no more calling anything a fallacy. Let's just agree with
Right.
that. Even though I didn't hear it, but if someone did say fallacy, no more fallacies. All right, let's go. All right, go
not
ahead.
accusing anyone of saying it. I'm going based on a long-term statistical analysis of prior odds of conversations. The fact that T-Jump says the word fallacy every 25 seconds in his debates. Nothing against anyone here, and I'm absolutely sure everyone can. It's just I started to smell it, right? Because it was like when the questions go down a leading question corridor, I can tell I'm getting set up for some sort of Socratic, what do you call it, subterfuge or gaslighting.
You understand you're in an interview called Ask a Pantheist Any Question, right?
You want to ask the questions that actually go somewhere. You don't want to ask the questions that blur the lines of the burden of proof. It's like, I get it, you don't accept my authority, but let's just have a little LARP where, for the duration of this convo that you do, called benefit of the doubt. Because if all you're doing is you're on a hunt for logical fallacies, it's a whole lot of other stuff you're not paying attention to.
All right, Sam, go ahead and ask your question, bro.
I thought we agreed not to. Okay, whatever.
This is fun.
That is fun, isn't it?
Who's a
Yeah, like we
pantheist?
should talk about what are the, what's the life of a pantheist? Why is it better,
No.
Imagine if
Okay.
eating a bowl of cereal felt better than 10,000 orgasms.
Wait, I got some questions
Is the
exactly
life of a pantheist.
specifically for pantheism.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I want to know exactly what are the qualities that you consider to identify something as a god. Yeah, aka like the universe for a pantheist.
How do I identify a god?
Yeah.
I'm a, like a social reformer. So being able to communicate with people involves accepting their definitions. So we're just going by my own definition of divinity. The most important thing is eternality, perfection. Really the non-changingness, like eternality implies non-changingness, but you can just say it again because it's that important. Basically anything you can extrapolate from the word perfect.
And for a pantheist, the universe then is perfect?
I would say it is. I just think about how beautiful the periodic table is sometimes, and I don't want to say I cry, but, a little misty-eyed.
Okay, so then I could infer that I'm God to a pantheist?
That would imply you're the universe, right?
Yeah,
it's like we don't want to go full off the rails in the first two lines of the convo, right?
Well, am I not the universe?
Well, if you're going to assert that you're the universe, we're in Kooksville again, right?
Well, okay.
Wait.
Am I not the universe? That's my question.
Oh, I mean, you tell me. Are you the universe?
Well,
I mean, this is
I'm
why
pretty
the
sure
Socratic
everyone in here
method-
is the universe.
This is why
Yeah.
the Socratic method eventually is a limit to it. It's called diminishing returns. You guys got to learn how to pick up when the Socratic method's reaching diminishing returns. If you have to go to the whole brain in a jar thing, or if you have to speculate a parallel universe, you're in trouble zone.
Well, that was a pretty direct question. Was that a yes or no?
The answer is universe is universe. We are a subset of the universe.
Okay, so I'm part of the universe.
That is correct.
Okay, so am I part God then?
You are part of the God.
Yeah.
Oh, perhaps you could think of yourself as a, cancerous polyp on the anus of God, if that was your
demigod
aesthetic preference.
Well, why the anus of God? Why not the pinky?
It was my, lame attempt at a joke there. But the point is that it's a metaphysical structure. It's the optimal metaphysical structure for philosophy, etc. And it's because you have, you want the biggest concept for God. There's a lot of human concepts for God too, right? But you want the one that you can prove reasonably to yourself is the optimal calibration. Your mind. Like, you don't want your God concept calibrating your mind into something ghoulish.
Anyway, but
I think the issue, the atheists take with religion.
Didn't you say the universe was a moad? Monad, sorry.
Universe operates on a monadic principle. So there's monad, which is unmoved mover, and then what's the opposite end of monad?
No, I don't.
Concrete.
Okay.
So everything is an emanation between the monad and the concrete is one end of it. So think of it like something out of something and going somewhere else.
So the universe
is a great metaphor.
The universe is not a moad; it just has a moad.
It's got an N in there, monad.
Oh yeah, sorry, monad.
You could say it functions on a monadic principle.
But I'm not entirely sure what that means. Like, so it
means that our laws of physics are best understood through this construct of a monad.
So the laws of physics aren't changing. And that's
correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's sort of like the one way to, I don't know if you want to call it prove, but establish that it's a necessity.
So does something
only like I made up the monad because I'm like this, fairy LARPer or whatever. It's like, no, I acknowledge it's something I need for, physical, whatever, speculation.
Does something only need a monad to be a god, or does it have to be the monad itself?
This isn't about God, okay? This is about how do you make a statement.
I thought we were talking about pantheism.
You're right. Well, part of being a pantheist is winning debates against non-pantheists.
Wait, you have to win a debate to be a pantheist?
Part of the pantheist culture is debate culture. You don't have to win a debate. You just have to accept that debates are how knowledge is refined.
Okay, but I'm asking a question about the position, not about like a practice you do in your free time.
Position of pantheism.
Yeah, it does
really nothing more than just saying the universe is divine, and then whatever, like you can't. There's not really precepts in the way that is the precept, and then everything else. It's more like you have a different sort of perspective on life, inconsequent to making this divine acknowledgement. And every pantheist is sort of different. Just like the troll lead head monster pantheist who hides under the bridge of somebody trying to cross over into the kingdom of speaking on behalf of pantheism.
Okay, so does a thing have to have monads, or does it have to be a monad to be a deity?
Think about just if nothing existed, okay, and then we wanted to make an argument. What would we need as a minimum structural complexity to be able to launch an argument from a supposition? Right. So if we take a trip down thought experiment lane and we say, well, why can't everything just be empirical? Can everything just be derived from the realm of observability of like things that are tangible, right? Understand what I mean?
So far,
you're following me with this notion of empiricism.
Yeah.
Empiricism is true. If I assert that empiricism is true, that's a metaphysical assertion.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to prove that. And in fact, monadism disproves this notion of empiricism. There's even another problem, which has to do with the structure of the real number line itself being implicitly Platonic. Using a Platonic construct to disprove Platonism via the Socratic method because you want to do intellectual masturbation and feel smart? Do you have a small ego? Like, give me a break. Sorry, that was a bit of my own side quest there, but yeah. We just said everything's empiricism. Self-refuting. Because to say everything is empirical is itself not empirical.
I don't know.
Understand that?
I don't.
Well, I mean, I do. I mean, the
You
scientific.
understand that that is an assertion, right? To say that we can know stuff, we can know everything empirically is an assertion made with proof. It's just an assumption. Seems real because it's like, well, the stuff's right there in front of me. Never mind that it's completely modulated by my own consciousness. But yeah, because I can convince myself that I'm observing these things, therefore they're more real. That's an assumption. It's called.
How is it an assumption when it can be verified, tested, repeated under peer review?
You can make measurements, but you can't demonstrate the validity of empiricism because empiricism got you the 2-dimensional periodic table. And Charfism got you the 3-dimensional periodic table. I'm one person. Versus all these other people who couldn't figure that out. And it's not really that complicated. They didn't figure it out.
What has been figured out?
Exactly. They're the validated means of knowledge. They do exist, but the issue is that there are different schools. Some are more rigorous than others. And then there's, this, let's not go into that for now, but let's continue talking about, so we've got one person who understands why the concept of empiricism being a way to understand reality being itself contradiction. Do you understand now, James? Like, I know not everybody can understand logic. I used to be a tutor for a really long time, so.
I don't know if when you say empiricism, I think of the scientific method. I don't know if it's a contradiction.
Yeah, I don't agree.
The reason for using it is definitely.
Okay, what is empiricism? I'm not trying to set you up here. I'm just, you have to follow the logic so that it makes sense.
By no means do I feel threatened or I feel like I'm being set up. So we can just have a
Sam A.L., I think, but it's okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Empiricism is the theory that all knowledge is derived from a sense of experience, stimulated by the rise of by experimental science. It is developed, and it's something that can be observed and verified.
Right. So that's a metaphysical assertion. That's saying that all that can be known is known through observation. There are two problems in that. One, it violates the monad. Two, it violates quantum physics in a way.
How is the monad verified?
Well, there's no basis to refute it. So the fact that people think that can refute the monad is itself a logical fallacy.
Wait, I thought we said we weren't going to talk about.
We have to understand this. We have to understand this notion about why empiricism is self-refuting, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying empiricism doesn't tell us something. No one's going to disagree that empiricism tells us something. The question is, does it tell us everything? If it did, it would be a categorical universal, also known as an axiom.
Right.
The fact that there is an axiom means that the system cannot be comprised entirely of empiricism, because axioms are metaphysical. By lending itself to this type of universalism, aka generalization, it's become self-refuting because it's gone too far for what it can actually do. The Socratic method. Because as soon as you can universalize, it's axiomatized. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if your axiom is that you don't need axioms, essentially, because you can just get everything out of empiricism, it's itself an axiom.
So I'm curious.
You understand that if your axiom is I don't need axioms, that's self-refuting.
I'm curious. How do you get from nothing to the monad not using sensory experience?
Traditional initiation, the only way anyone has ever learned anything for all time. So,
as far as I'm aware, you can only do that with sensory experience.
Sensory experience. That's not the presumptive basis of modern science, which is the manner in which people are making most of their arguments. Modern science seeks to reject subjectivity. They say consciousness is subjective, therefore can't be treated with science. Another absurd claim.
I've never
Got
heard
it.
If that really
But
gets around to what I was asking. Like I don't.
I didn't
don't
get to
think
the
there
end of
is
my
a-
explanation yet. I'm trying to
Okay.
make you understand that you need a minimum metaphysical complexity to be able to make assertions of fact.
How do you
Stuff's
get to
only
that
true
without?
relative to axioms. Stuff's only true relative to axioms. The question is, do we need one axiom? We know we don't have, we can't use 0 axiom. So use one? Do we need a second one? Right now, all I've done is attempt to prove you that you can't have none, which is basically what empiricism is.
No, I don't think that's. I don't think that's implied empiricism anywhere. I mean, all you did was give me, I think, a bunch of things you have to have sensory experience to even get to start with.
That's what I heard too.
Okay. So now all of a sudden, you've acknowledged the sensory part of the causal chain? Doesn't change anything.
Well, I mean, can you show me how you could get any knowledge without using sensory experience?
Show me how you can get knowledge with it.
Wait, he
You
asked you a
can't, but
question.
I can show you
Hang on.
how I got knowledge with revelation.
No, hang
I'm
on,
the
Jen.
one who
Jen,
has
wait,
the
hang on.
But
non-burden of proof
did you
here.
not sense that experience?
Hang on, Jen. In all honesty, Cam asked you a question and you came back with a question. Can you answer his question?
If he's willing to rephrase it, sometimes I have to clarify the
Mhm.
question. I'm not trying to dodge. I'm just trying
Sure.
to clarify it. Sometimes question needs to be reframed into a way that makes more sense.
Okay.
Otherwise
Right.
The answer doesn't make sense.
How about I just give you the basis of what I'm thinking of here, that instead of just a question, so you get an idea of what I'm thinking of. I think human beings, when they're born, I mean, you have some biological presets, right? But if you don't ever get any sensory experience, you don't go basically anything beyond a screaming baby.
So the question would follow, how do you gain knowledge without the use of sensory perceptions?
Sensory perceptions are part of the picture, right? But alone, they do not suffice as actually there is a school where they do suffice as an acceptable means of derivation of knowledge. But I don't think anybody on this panel is in that school.
Okay, hang on. Is that answering the question? I didn't understand it. How do you gain
Acceptable interpretation? It's not my interpretation, but believing that only sensory experiences are valid is an acceptable position. It's called Sharvaka. It's not what I believe because I don't believe it has sufficient means to actually get factual statements out of it. It's traditionally accepted. So
I think
that understand what
think
that
I
means? I
agree.
don't know.
I think I actually agree with you. I'm just so the way I see it is that from the time that you're born, maybe even before you're completely born, you're intaking all the sensory information. You build it up over your life, and you get to a certain point when you can start manipulating that in a developed mind and come up with new ideas, which you could consider knowledge, which isn't directly derived from sensory experience.
How about you put it like this? The sensory experience is part of the cycle of consciousness. You're going to go ahead and affirm that. Sound good?
Yeah.
That's what you want. You want a simple, positive axiom that you can defend. This one is traditional axiom, so don't find the same issues defending it. Well, obviously, it's in the modern day not the easiest to defend. Nor is it the most correct, in my opinion, but it's not a bad place to start. Compared to what else you could be leaving. Yeah, there's a limit to that, right? All you ever accept is your own perceptions. You're also only ever accepting your own interpretations of perceptions. So you're limited to that. So if you think of your mind as a computer program that has a bunch of bugs in it,
El
every
papelito que
time
me
you
dieron, yo no sé
impose
dónde lo pusiste el papelito de
all
cuerpo.
the thinking function or whatever, you're re-instantiating an error. There's no reason to presuppose there'd be no errors. And you can look at technology. Evolution, quote, perfect. I mean, it's very efficient, but there's tons of like crap, floaters in your eyes. Right, I got off on a tangent there. Have I answered the question or just more confusion here? I'm hearing silence.
Yeah, I think you answered the question. I was trying to figure out, because I think we're actually on the same page on that, because deep down inside I'm actually just a pragmatist, but I see empiricism as fine, because I view the sense of thinking, like you're thinking about things, working through stuff as sense. So that's why I accept
calling sensory experience empirical. That's a contradiction in terms, but okay.
Well,
I don't know if I don't think
that's what empirical means. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, there are two things, right? So one end of it's subjectivity, the other end of it is quote unquote objectivity, which we're not sure if that's a thing, but we feel subjectivity is a thing. And we modelize them as though they were separate. We don't want to conflate something like perceptions and the fact that you can make measurements is the same level of certainty. Yeah. They're both certain to some extent, but they're different kinds of certainty.
I think we actually agree. I just think we're defining a couple things differently.
Just take something like, is the universe conscious? It sounds moronic, right? Problem with it is that we can't disprove it because we don't know how to even start to check what the heck that even means, right?
Is it more important to disprove something or prove something?
They're both important. Like saying, is a left hand or right hand more important? It's like they serve each other. They serve for different purposes, though. So that's why it's like a puzzle where you understand what all the different. And I'm really glad you asked this, because we're sort of playing with a not full deck when we just have the Socratic method. We just have empiricism and Socratism. We're missing out on a bunch of other things, right?
Sure. Well, how would we find out whether or not the universe has a conscience or not?
We may not be able to, right? So if we go back to Scripture, we have quotes in Scripture where there's things that say the effect of like God doesn't know where God created himself, right?
Wait. Why are we using Scripture when we're talking science?
Well, science comes from Scripture, right?
Science is a type of
religion, or an implementation of philosophy. Sorry.
Oh, hang on. How did you come to the conclusion that science came from God or religion, and that science is a religion?
Conclusion that it didn't. I mean, come on.
Science does not require a belief system.
Yes, it does.
What
requires a belief in the scientific method? Well, this is what the problem with empiricism is this bait and switch.
No, it's not. Actually, what is your definition for religion? Just so we have clarity here. Why do you laugh?
Because I have a theory about this, but I don't want to invoke that theory. But I'm using it in the.
How are you using? Hang on. How are you?
I'm using it in the colloquial sense.
Gotcha.
I'm not trying to trick you with a weird definition of religion. Using it in a colloquial sense. These are scriptures. It's allowed for science to become a thing. So yeah, obviously I could quote Scripture because it's like you're not the first person to ask this question. It's been asked before. They tried to answer it. Maybe we can find a better answer now. So I'm just telling you what other answers have been presented, because there's limits to what we can be sure about what we know. And if we take the other side where we're sure the universe isn't conscious, we're asserting a negative. And I'm trying to sort of convince people that that's a bad way to argue.
Can we get back on track? I think my question was, what is your definition for religion?
I said I was using the colloquial definition. So organized
I didn't hear it.
System of thought centered on God.
Okay, so it requires a higher being.
I shouldn't have to state the colloquial definition. You should just know it.
Right? Well, when you infer that science is a religion, and the definition you're using requires.
I didn't say it's a religion. Sorry. Science is a particular application. Application of religion.
Nah, see, you're throwing it in there.
Philosophy comes out of religion. And science comes out of philosophy. I didn't mean to say science was a religion. I am not
Yeah.
trying to say that.
Okay, cool. As long as
just-
we understand.
Just for
What
James,
I will say is that something like scientism may function Socratically, the sense of fanaticism, etc. But no, I'm not trying to do some bait and switch where it's like, well, this cup is a religion. You know what I mean? I wasn't doing that. I'm sorry for the confusion. Go ahead. Is it Sam?
yeah, just for James, Oxford Dictionary second definition: a pursuit of interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance.
Okay, yeah. That's why it's good for conversation to come to understanding what definition wants to be used for the sake of the conversation.
Yeah,
That's why I was asking. Yeah.
I gotta go. So thanks for answering questions.
Hope that
Cool.
was helpful, and I hope you got something out of that. Nice to meet you.
I
Appreciate
feel atheist all the
Bye,
time with
Sam.
pantheism.
Thank you, Sam.
So Jen, what, why, and how caused you to be a pantheist?
Why and how caused you to convert out of pantheism?
But hang on, why do you do
This
that?
is what you. This is
I'm
what you,
asking-
the thing is. Like, what I believe is what you believe. If you don't get
Right.
tricked into believing something else.
Okay, well, I'm asking you, what led you to believe in pantheism? How about that?
Always did. I never not. So I didn't come to believing in it through a series of inquiries. It just always did. My belief became stronger over time and more detailed over time.
Okay, what increased your strength in the belief?
Well, it's like it's the thing that an X-Men, that guy Wolverine or whatever. What's his bones made out of?
I have no idea.
Adamantium? Like
Well, we're talking
imagine
about
the strongest thing in the world. Can that really get stronger? When did
at the
it
current
work?
space,
It's like
at
you have
the
a
current time, I
titanium
don't know.
alloy. When did it get stronger? It's like it's always been the same strength.
Okay.
I learned stuff relative to this culture at particular points, but my own feelings didn't really change at all.
Okay.
I got
No,
the
it's cool.
periodic table. That was like a huge. I was super happy.
Mm-hmm.
I felt
So
like be able to share this wonderful beauty with so many people. You know.
the periodic table.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty.
Cool. Right. Yeah. I'm interested in understanding why does that thought ideology equal it being God?
What's the periodic table? Micro God. But it's also macro God because it's like the alpha and the omega, right? So it's like everything that you can empirically observe is in that.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that you can empirically observe is not in that.
Well, from my
It
chemistry
transcends
class,
the universe, but it's also the smallest conceivable, irreducibly complex entity.
how does the periodic table transcend the universe?
The sense that every element, everything that's empirically observable is an element. Definition.
Right. And isn't it part of the universe?
The universe is part of it is more accurate, but really they just arise at the same time. It's a cookie cutter template for the energetic distribution of the universe.
Okay. So how does that equal God?
It's not God, it's micro God. God's the universe.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Forgive me. I did hear you say micro God. That's right.
I know it's confusing, but it's like, it's fucking awesome. I love thinking this stuff. You know, everything is wonderful for me, and I would love to have other people sharing that joy. I'm not just saying it either.
So when you say you'd love to have other people sharing that joy, are you meaning you want them to believe in pantheism?
It's more like experience pantheism.
Okay.
It's not really a belief. It's more a lack of a belief. It's a melting away of false
Interesting.
beliefs and subsuming of your into your own essence, which isn't nothing. Have this essence, right? And it's
Well, I find that intriguing.
things
How
sort of been there since you were a baby, I guess.
cool. How is it a lack of belief? I find that interesting.
To
me,
this
that-
goes
that
to the
sounds like
nature of
atheism.
consciousness, right? It's like, why do we believe what we believe? Well, first of all, because we have this body that serves primarily as a means of straining experience to like a tunnel vision.
Do you
Our
believe
ability to ask questions is predicated on us having a brain. Energetic.
do you believe in
Go ahead.
determinism or will or any of that kind of biz?
I believe in quantum determinism. The determinism question is a good one to sort of go through the normal thought process of how I would solve any problem. So you want to bind the problem at either end. The idea is you bind it and then you stitch it through a really tiny little filter and get it all organized, right? So what's on the one end of free will?
I guess usually like
the
an
no
agent.
argument, right? What we want to do is superimpose the most convincing argument pro and con. Anyone want to take a crack at what the best argument against free will is?
I guess it's that you don't really control any of the physical interactions that give rise to your choices, or
Can't establish that you do, only the perception that you do. I would say the fact that you can't go back in time. So from that perspective, if we can call it like a pseudo-objective perspective of looking at the present as the past in relation to the future. Sense? Sort of transposing myself theoretically forward in time.
So it's like you can't say that you could have made a different choice in the past.
I can't change fuck all that's in the past.
Right.
Relative to now, what's happened in the past, I can't change. Second argument, since the present is the past relative to the future, is also unchangeable relative to the future. Therefore, you have your sort of pseudo-objective hard limit, the no camp of free will. And then we go over to the yes camp. Well, it really does feel like we have choice. It really does feel like that means something.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in free will, but I also believe.
Do we have a limit? Do we have limited free will? Like we have some free will, but not complete.
What we want to do is figure out physically.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about free will, what is it physically that's corresponding to?
So what I would say is something like there could be multiple futures of the present that we're in.
Hypothetical. You don't want to presup stuff you can't guarantee, right? So you already said you want to no, sorry, it wasn't you, but it was already said earlier that presupping the self is a good idea. Now presup a bunch of other stuff orthogonal to the self, right? There's essentially two perspectives, right? There's the objective one and the subjective one. They're not quite the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I usually say I have like two base axioms, and it's the self and then the external world.
That's a perfect way to do it, right? That is essentially the Pantheist axioms, and my current work is like trying to prove that it's necessary, like that this is actually the one that obeys Occam's razor. Any less complex, and it's basically not tautological, sorry, it's self-contradicting. But back to this free will thing. The fact that it feels like we have free will is a shitty argument. We should not use it. What we should do is bind determinism as a concept. And how do we do that?
Well, I mean, I believe in determinism, but I'm also like, I like the Everettian interpretation. So
we have to go with something that people actually know about. Like, I've never heard of that interpretation, and if it abstract, arbitrary stuff, it's hard. To me, the uncertainty principle establishes that. No problem. Because the uncertainty principle basically puts a hard limit on determinism. It basically tells you that one-to-one determinism is not a thing.
Yeah, Everettian is many worlds, so it's like saying that
we can't establish that there's more than one world, more than one universe, right? So we don't want to go extra universal. We don't have to do that. I mean,
in a sense, it's kind of like a misnomer that it's called that, because there is still just like one world, but there's just different branches that don't causally interact with each other. And
assertions with no evidence.
Well, it's from
stuff doesn't causally interact. It doesn't exist for all intents and purposes.
Well, it's from
everything we're talking about is causal interactions.
Well, no, I mean there would be things causally interacting in each branch, but the branches don't interact. I mean, it's kind of like, you know how
Okay.
the Hubble
yeah.
sphere. The Hubble sphere says that, like, we can't interact with things that are like expanding. I don't know how much of the cosmological.
I get the idea. I get the idea
stuff
for
that you
sure. Yeah,
said,
that's a
but-
consequence of relativity. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
It
things
basically
that
comes
we
down
can't
to the
causally
speed of
interact
light.
with.
Speed of light being universal maximum displacement velocity.
Yeah. So in the Everettian approach to quantum mechanics, you just have the Schrodinger equation, which projects that, like, there are different quantum states that just don't interact with each other, and then that's how you get to there being these branches, and they're just called worlds. Like, that's kind of like a colloquial term that's thrown around, but it's all part of one, like, overall wave function, basically.
Non-interacting parts of an overall wave function is a contradiction. You can't establish non-entanglement. You have to axiomatize entanglement. Bunch of problems with that. But you don't want to go too far, right? You don't want to overstate your certitude, and by marrying a theory, that's what essentially you're doing. You just want to say one-to-one hard determinism has been disproven by uncertainty principle. What the uncertainty principle says is that there's really only ever end-to-end determinism. Does anybody here know what that is? The slit experiment of quantum mechanics?
The double slit.
Doesn't matter.
So
It has to do with whether you can know in advance of the observation where it's going to go.
well,
Yes,
it
there's no
actually
in both
changes
cases.
the outcome depending on whether or not you measure it prior.
The
or
thing
not.
doing the measurement is the slit, so it's measured in all cases. The point is that nobody's going to be able to debunk this. It's a fact. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It's a hard limit on determinism, aka mechanical determinism is impossible. We have two things. We have time travel backwards is impossible, and mechanical determinism is impossible. The reality is somewhere between those poles, right? Because those seem to be different polarized assertions. One in the favor of free will and one in the favor of it. Kind of makes sense? We're not at the answer yet, but does it make sense that you have two ends of the question?
Hi, Jen. I'm a new speaker here. Cam.
I guess we can just keep going. I don't feel like anybody understood what I said. I'm slightly sad, but it's all good.
I was
just how it goes in math. It's complicated.
I'd like to talk more about the uncertainty principle, if you want to.
Oh, great. Thank God. One of my favorite subjects.
So, there are a variety of uncertainty principles. They each arise when it's the case that we have two observables in quantum mechanics.
Canonically conjugate.
Yeah, that's right. So, for example,
it's not every time, and it's also unclear the degree to which those things are dependent on matter waves, aka Bohmian mechanics, which is not actually 100% correct, but more correct than any, quote, empirical particle models.
Yeah, so for example, you get an uncertainty relation between position and momentum, but you also get an uncertainty relation between, say, spin in the z axis, or spin in the x-axis, or spin in the y-axis.
They're not independent measurements.
What are not independent measurements?
Anything canonically conjugate on the quantum level is not an independent measurement. The fact that you can ascribe the uncertainty principle to that is basically proving that they're dependent measurements, because the hyperlocalization of electron in a slit causes a diffusion in the possible delta p's associated, because the delta p leads to a delta v. It's all because of a preservation of something, conservation of something, which eventually goes to Heisenberg exclusionary thing.
Well, that's why there's, like,
Conservation
a
of no
relationship.
ability, I guess.
I don't think I followed that.
It's just to say that the two quantities are related to each other by the uncertainty principle, right?
Yeah, so the uncertainty principle arises from something a little bit more deeper in linear algebra. you can kind of think of it like, if you know anything about Fourier transforms, you'll know that it's the case that, like, say, if you have like a peaked wave function, such a wave function can be composed of an infinite number of sine waves, right, to produce it, of different differing wavelengths. And it's sort of, the uncertainty relation arises from a switch in basis when you're looking at a particular quantum state. And it's because of the fact that, like, when it's the case that you have like a peaked wave function in the position basis, when you look at that wave function, like that is the state, the quantum mechanical state, in the momentum basis, what you find is that the state representation is of a infinite number of sine waves, all in superposition, meaning that like when you attempt to measure something that's peaked in the position basis, you'll find that the range of observational outcomes extends across all of those superpositions in the momentum basis. And the same thing happens, like, for example, if you have spin in the Z, which is like, for example, spin up in a state that is spin up in the Z basis, you'll find that the spin in the X basis, or the X axis, is spread out over the two orthogonal outcomes, up or down. So it occurs in a number of other observables in quantum mechanics.
Yeah, I know actually time and energy are one of the other, like, Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the trippiest one.
Yeah. Nobody talks
that's
about
basically,
that one.
Well, that's actually, I think, the best way to understand concept of like quantum fusion and fission. I don't believe in the strong and weak nuclear forces. I think it's all electrogravitational. The way that you can get these delta E's, right, which correspond to the transitions of fusion and fission, is that there's a small enough delta T within the nucleus because it's so dense. So this tiny delta T causes this canonical uncertainty spread in E, which then bumps part of the system up to the higher energy state. Oh yeah.
My position on what you were saying before, Jim, when you made the comment about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, shows that there cannot be determinism. Well, I'm rephrasing, but cannot be determinism in physics. I find that to be what I call like an interpretation-laden statement about quantum mechanics. So
that's why I said 1-to-1.
Yes, actually, if I missed that, I apologize, but I agree with that.
I completely take your point. I completely 100% agree with you.
Yeah, if
Sorry,
it is
there's a bit of reverb. Is it possible to use like headphones or something? I'm not hearing the reverb with anyone else.
Yeah, I can. So, yeah, if you take it to be the case, I'll just put my headphones on now.
And just in the meantime, thanks everyone for tuning in. I see Ethernet there. I've seen you before, so nice to see you again. And thanks to Naturalistic Pantheism, aka Frank, for reaching out to have this combo. I'm loving it.
Is that better?
No problem, Jen. Are you still able to stick around, or do you want to just?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can keep going. Don't worry about me.
So, yeah, if you take it to be the case that we allow there to be multiple outcomes in a particular measurement, that is, if we, say, for example, take the Schrödinger picture, like the picture that would describe that there is like a particular measurement apparatus that has one value and a particular measurement apparatus that has another value, and that they become isolated on separate orthogonal or near orthogonal branches of the wave function as a result of an outcome measurement, then yes, like you can have something like determinism. But if you restrict what can exist to being a single outcome of a measurement experiment, it's the case that you must insert some kind of indeterminacy into the theory, because the dynamics of the Schrodinger equation is deterministic. It's just the case that it actually shows you that there ends up becoming these two orthogonal non-interacting branches.
I would agree that they're orthogonal. I would not agree that they are non-interacting, and I would assert that the fundamental cause of interaction is actually this conservation of measurement. This idea that there is a limited, aka 3+1, orthogonal observables per canonical order, and no more. It's basically what the physics version of my theory says.
So when you say that
actually, I had the answer to what collapses the wave. It's not a wave function because it's not a function, but I'll call it a waveform. It's what collapses the waveform is dimensionality. It's the fact that it runs up against the 3+1 possible observables per order, which are fixed.
So you think that wave function collapse is an objective thing? So for example...
No, there is no such thing as objectivity in that sense, because everything is inter-waveform. They're basically reaching out to each other, perpetuity, measuring 3+1 for all time. Well, not time, right? Obviously, because 1 is time.
Yeah, it seems like you would probably like Everettian quantum mechanics if you looked into it more, because that's where the wave function never collapses. That's the idea.
It deforms, I call it reduces. It's like, think of a lake where one drop of water falls on it. That.
Yeah. Well, that's
not a collapse. The lake's not
might help me understand.
Do that.
A question that may help me understand you more is: do you think that the state description in the Schrodinger Hamiltonian formalism is representational?
Could be a representational form, right? There is an actual physical entity there. It's not just purely an equation where you can do integral phi star phi dx and guarantee yourself it'll integrate to 1, right? That's
why,
presupping Euclideanism, which, guess what? Heisenberg uncertainty principle disproves Euclideanism. You don't want to use an axiom. I want to use an axiom that's already been disproven.
Minkowski space in general relativity, so it's not.
What's Minkowski space, right? What's Minkowski space?
Well, in the relativized forms of quantum mechanics, they're going to use the Einstein field equations, so it's going to end up
which either are
curvature. It's a manifold, right?
So again, what's your basis to presume there can be such a thing as inertial reference frame? You can literally disprove that that's a thing, not arbitrary. If there is one, there's only one, not arbitrary at all. So, again, just to say that this idea of the real number line, okay, I call that Euclideanism, but it's the real number line axiomatized as a valid means of representation, quote, representing, quote, empiricism, right? Which, again, we already debunked. Taking that to the side, though, the real number line, this notion of an indivisible thing where all the rationals, the rationals and the irrationals are distinct, that you can always find an irrational between two rationals, right? Infinite series.
I should ask a quick question.
Reality, the point, I just want to quickly end, point is that reality doesn't have an infinite series, right? All the way back to Zeno's paradox to Heisenberg principle. Not a thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask about the empiricism thing. I have something to say about what you also just said, but all of these physical principles, all the stuff that we've come up with, human beings have derived over the past 400 or 500 years in physics is mainly through empiricism. So
I'm not sure if it is, and I'm not an empiricist.
I really don't think Leibniz would tell you that calculus he determined empirically.
Well, that's mathematics, though. I mean, I'm saying physics. Like, we only know that a certain physical theory applies because of empiricism. Like, you could come up with an infinite number of theories of physics.
Technological advancement and the trash that passes for theoretical physics have fuck all to do with each other, and it sounds really noob tier to claim otherwise.
I mean, I'm trying to say that there's a link between like empiricism in terms of the way that we approach.
You're setting up a very tenuous link, which is much easier to explain by other things.
Well, no, it's like, okay, listen, like how do you know that there's any reason to believe in any sort of quantum mechanics? It's because of empirical
I already
evidence.
know physics from learning my religion, so it's just a matter of transposing what I already know onto what you've discovered through your bungling is unfalsifiable, which is
so Jedi. I think we should be really careful not to make the conflation that you can say, for example, update credences and models about the world or hypotheses about the world using empirical evidence and empiricism as an epistemology, because there are many epistemologies that that allow for our credences to be affected by observation that aren't empiricism.
Sure, like I don't mean empiricism in a strict sense of like it's the only way to come to any knowledge.
Hey, did anyone ever get enlightenment from empiricism?
I mean, so by empiricism,
worthless.
You just mean like only using empirical information.
I mean, assuming that empirical information is a means towards knowledge. It's obviously something. It's something. Empiricism isn't nothing. It has something to do with, obviously, but it's like the Socratic method. It works only where it's intended to work, and in other places where you try to apply it, you reach what are called diminishing returns very quickly.
Okay, but you wouldn't like just write something off because it's empirical, right?
Oh, I would only.
She's a physicist. I'm pretty sure not.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to.
Empiricism. My issues with empiricism start when metaphysical interpretations are shoehorned in as being mere inevitabilities when really they're completely unjustified, superstitious quackery.
Well, that's right. And empiricism isn't a metaphysical thesis either. It's an epistemological.
It's functioning as one.
It's an epistemological thesis. Yeah, it might be the case that like by...
Let him talk. Why do you have to cut him off?
It might be the case that when you... sorry about that. Sometimes I pause. It might be the case that if you presuppose or take as an axiom epistemologically that empiricism is the only way to come to knowledge, then what it does is limits what metaphysical theses you could arrive at or what ontology you could arrive at. But of course, like it's an epistemological position at heart, but yeah, it can have consequences in terms of what metaphysics you can arrive at.
Yeah, I see what you guys are saying, and I agree.
If people don't believe that, what do they believe is a valid way to come to knowledge?
If someone would answer the scientific...
Sorry, James, you go.
Yeah, I was going to say, if someone would say the scientific method, would that be an acceptable answer?
A beginning of an answer. Be a start
you might
of an
say
answer.
It's partially rooted in like empiricism anyway.
So the scientific...
we could say that too. We could say it's partially rooted in empiricism, but that there's something else too. Right? There are geometric arguments being made. There's sort of been this slipping in the axioms of Euclideanism, the back door of science.
I've never heard of Euclideanism. What is that?
The idea that what the real number line is.
Well, Euclidean geometry is like basically planar classical geometry.
Okay, so it's geometry mathematics. Would that be a fair?
It's like sub-geometry. Okay, so the real number line isn't geometry per se. It's what you do geometry on. So the real number line. Anybody know what that is?
Real number line?
I think that's from Euclid because you're talking about like just points and comparison lengths. I don't know if he necessarily was using like a real number line yet, but I could be wrong.
The concept of the real number line comes from Euclidean continuity. If you want me to attribute the real number line to someone else than Euclid, I will. If you can tell me who is most responsible for that atrocity.
I'm not sure who it comes from, but I think it comes from like later systems of like essentially when you get into like decimal notation and stuff like that, which
just sort of got shoehorned in, right? We've got empiricism, we've got these real number lines, and there you go. Those are assumed to be the route to knowledge. Can we really be said to have better knowledge, or no? Actually, we're all losing knowledge quickly. I would argue we're losing knowledge quickly. I'll have a very hard time understanding whether arguments are accurate or not.
Well, I mean, I think like, when if you look at the history of like these mathematical concepts, like you have like the real number line, and you have like later on they have like complex numbers, and if you didn't have those things, like you wouldn't have things like modern quantum mechanics, like because the mathematics is all based on those ideas.
It's not quite. Quantum mechanics is based on more than just numbers. Euclideanism.
For sure, but it does, like he said, it's characterized in its most general forms in the form of Hilbert spaces, which are spaces over complex numbers, right? So
disproved they exist on my blog 5 years ago. So I'm not going to change my mind on that because they violate the measurement limit. It's only 3 + 1 observables per order. Now to say that you can have this space where there's actually more than that, and how do you not realize that's a contradiction of the principle?
Well,
that sounds super interesting. So can I ask you a question about that? Like, so say, for example, we take QFT, right? QFT is such that, like, it's formulated in terms of fields, and those fields are required to be expressed in a Hilbert space of infinite dimensionality. Is your view with respect to the space of states that we use representationally in quantum mechanics that it's finite dimensional?
Yep. Within the dimensions that there is an infinite fineness, but the number of orthogonal observables is finite. But so for within example, each orthogonal observable, you get a type of infinite fineness. So don't get me wrong. Like
So for example, if we represent
very hard to answer.
If we represent an electron, like the usual way to do that within either, a QFT or alternatively just in more like a older Schrodinger picture, you have a wave function that spans like infinite directions, both left and right, if you're just looking at it in a single position dimension. And your view is that you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, and what's the alternative?
Give me a second. I don't like to speak in oughts. It's more like if this, then that,
Right.
Like you said, there's a lot of great understanding. A lot of great understanding came out of the concept of the real number line, and I don't forget who said it, but the imaginary number line too. Like we can't reconcile certain symmetries. For example, the eigenstates of the rotation matrix without I, right? The imaginary number. Mm-hmm. So I'm cool with all that. I don't want to get rid of any of this stuff. People just need to realize that the operations of calculus, the things we know are true based on quantum mechanics, are incompatible. I mean, we have to throw out calculus. It just means that when you have quantization, integrating over a continuous function, which in actuality is quantized, it's not going to be correct.
Well, I think like the quantization is, it's not imposed, but like I've often heard it said that like, something like the Planck length, like it's not like space isn't just a grid of Planck cubes. It's because you could shift it all like half a Planck cube, and then.
Well, that's right. And in QFT, it's not like that at all.
Right. So it is continuous. But like the quantization is coming in from the vibrational modes, right?
That's right. Yeah. Like if you have like an energy, like if you have boundaries on your, your state representation, then you get modes.
And that's
energy modes and
like
momentum modes
and directions, right?
Yeah, and it shows up like really quickly, of course, because we have atoms that provide for us these natural energy boundaries, such that like we naturally see within basic versions of quantum mechanics these modes arising. I mean, that was the original way that Bohr, solved the problems of the Rutherford model in the analysis of atomic theory.
Hey guys and gals, I just wanted to say thanks for this conversation. Naturalist, Pantheism, and Jedi Master, thanks for hosting this room. Jen, thanks for your information. Appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation. I got to go. I look forward to more. You guys have a good one.
See you, James.
Later.
Peace.
So back to the question I was asking Jen, like when we want to represent within your sort of picture something like an electron, how do we do it?
Want to make a pie? First, you must invent the universe.
I love it. It's Carl Sagan. You're channeling.
I'm trying to actually find a diagram which is going to make my point faster, but for some reason, the one I really want is I'm having trouble finding it because I actually have the dimensions labeled.
Hey, Cam, can
Here
I
we
ask
go.
you a question really quick?
Yeah, sure thing, man.
Seem to know a lot about QFT and these sort of things. Have you heard of cyclic conformal cosmology from Penrose?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know enough about it to talk very coherently. But yes, and I actually did a review of his discussion with William Lane Craig, where it came up as like a sticking point in their conversation about the past and the Big Bang cosmology. But yeah, I know about it enough to understand that it talks about how it's the case that when you take, for example, our traditional Big Bang cosmology, and then you look at it from the perspective of general relativity and quantum mechanics and move it forward in time, what you find is that the representation with respect to with respect to entropy of the system, as it's the case that all of the sort of potentially interacting particles are such that they are isolated in that anything that they could interact with goes beyond their cosmic horizon or outside of their light cone, then your representation ends up looking like something that looks like the initial state of our Big Bang cosmology once again. And from that perspective, there is like a way to look at it that suggests that maybe what we actually have is some cyclic aspect in a single dimension in time. So it's not like a sort of like an expanding and then crunching type of thing. It's like as everything becomes really spread out, the state actually ends up looking like what we have at the initial Big Bang. Now, I don't know if that's quite a perfect summary, but I think it's something along those lines.
Yeah, it definitely, that's about right. I've always found that very fascinating. And like, I've only ever understood it through like the relativity lens. So I've never heard like the quantum mechanics lens on that. It's always been interesting to me, but
yeah, no, I don't. And, of course, it's just like one among the many flowers blooming in the discussion about contemporary cosmology. But Penrose is a super smart guy. And I have his book, The Road to Reality. I don't know if you've ever checked that out, but it's a pretty dense book. I've never got through it because it gets into an enormous amount of mathematics that's beyond my present knowledge. But it's a pretty cool book regardless.
Yeah, Penrose is fascinating, honestly. I'll have to check that book out at some point, but I'll let it go back to Jen here.
Hey,
Just
before
wanted to share.
give me a sec, Jen. Before you guys keep going, if anyone in the audience has any questions for Jen, you can raise your hand and ask now. Keep going. Keep going, guys. I'm sorry.
If anyone wants to join from the audience, don't be shy. I think I've met Arjun before. You know, around. She's got a channel. It's worth checking out. It's got various discussions in theology. It's called Theology Unleashed. So we wanted to talk about the electron. So, it's a top-down metaphysics. We have this like non-dualism at the universal level, and then going down from there to more specificity, as opposed to surmise is like sort of a ground up from this empirical reductionist scientific materialism thing. So it's in relation to what's like what exists, what's real. So I don't know if you guys can see that image. I don't see a way to screen share an image here, otherwise I would, but I put it in the general chat. Want to check it out?
Yeah, what are the colors there? Is that like is that the quantum number? Is that the spin? What is that?
The way we want to look at it is that it's one object. It has 4 colors, but it's essentially just one thing. And it arises basically imminently. It's not like it starts on the left and goes to the right, or starts in the middle and goes out to the sides. It's just boom. It's imminent.
What kind of scale are we looking at here?
It's an energetic.
I'm assuming these are like the amplitude sizes.
It's an energetic representation. Let's start with what we already do know, which is the 2-dimensional periodic table. So if you don't know what that looks like, then pull it up in periodic table in your search engine. But you should sort of already know what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's in my head fairly well.
Awesome. Yeah, so you've I'm sure for you it is. Yeah, so for the periodic table there are 118 microstates. Basically, shape we've detected ends at 118. Even trying to get to 118 is sort of tenuous because those states are very unstable. So there's a question as to whether if something exists for like a picosecond and then it decays, does it really exist? It's sort of a different discussion, but argument's basically that 118 is the maximum because there's a pervasion of +1 or 1, 2, 3, 4, as I've labeled them here on the diagram, but you can see they're orthogonal 1, 2, 3, 4s. There's like 2 sets of 1, 2, 3, 4s, and 1, 2, 3, 4 is the measurement limit. 3 + 1, 3 space, 1 time. Because God realized that what we experience as time on this scale is just one teeny tiny little bit of time, just like what we see is only one teeny tiny bit of the electromagnetic spectrum. But this is sort of like the originator cookie cutter of space and time. All space and time is occurring precipitated within this larger shape. And in terms of what an electron is, all these entities require electrons because they're all elements. So each sphere represents 2 elements, and you start counting from the middle. First large central sphere would be hydrogen and helium, and then you go out from the center, counting upwards of proton numbers. The way to 59. So there's like a dualism, right? That this reverse shape sort of expanding in all directions symmetrically also has this fundamental dualism. I call it that. Don't really know what else to call it, but it's basically the alternating 1/2, -1/2, 1/2, -1/2. I think it's called the spin quantum number. At least that's what they called it in chemistry when I was taking it. But from what I understand, there are slightly different jargon terms. But yeah, basically that's the real thing. And the electron is also real, but it is real relative to protons in the sense that there's this charge differential which arises from this fundamental thing, basically differentiating matter. Because matter is not always differentiated, right? It's not differentiated in the black parts in the sky. But once it gets differentiated, it's differentiated through this thing, and then all of a sudden it's what they call luminiferous. And so an electron is basically like your charge quantum. All that to say it's a charge quantum, but like you're seeing in a perspective of top-down metaphysics.
Yeah, I think that my original question, I was just, this is really interesting, by the way, and I'm not wanting to detract from it, but I was more curious about whether or not you have a different mode of representing mathematically the things that we think exist within physics, like electrons. And I was making a contrast between the way we do this representation in, say, QFT or some non-relativistic form of quantum mechanics, in which we do use we do use complex numbers, which are which span over the reals, and we also use the reals with respect to particular observables like position, and our state representation over such an observable like position spans the reals.
I guess you got to become a Buddhist or something. Kidding.
Well, I do like Buddhism, so that's an available path for me.
If I had to pick a religion, it would probably be Buddhism.
Yeah. I was just making a little joke there, but I mean, these concepts are like, some of them have some realness to them. Like, you can argue, anything rational is real in the sense that God's perfect and therefore logic comes from God. So anything logic is godly. So what's the error in that logic?
Well, I would have to talk about which system of logic, but yes.
We blow chunks at telling what logic is, right? And there's no way around it. We suck. So I'm not saying you're going to have to never use these things you've learned ever again, because I still use calculus even though I've disproven calculus. You gotta let yourself disprove calculus before you can get to the next level. It's not offensive to disprove calculus.
That actually reminds me of something. I was recently digging into, and I have fairly low credence on how well the whole project is going to turn out, but digging into Stephen Wolfram's work within, recasting or like looking at a new sort of fundamental ontology for.
You heard of Thad Roberts?
Pardon me?
You heard of Thad Roberts? Like a physics. Superman?
No, but if I finish my
sorry, I just got so excited. Go ahead.
Within his model, like in which you use hypergraphs and the sort of fundamental entity within the ontology of these nodes and relations within a hypergraph to represent, physical systems. It's also the case that like a traditional application of calculus doesn't actually work on these hypergraphs, and so you need to actually find a way in which a form of calculus can be used on this entity that's not directly amenable to like typical analysis. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? Like, it's when you say you've disproven calculus?
I'm just saying that right now it sounds like what they're trying to do is maybe like find a workaround to make calculus still work, which has been failing since a really long time ago. So yeah, we have to disprove calculus, not with the goal of stopping to use calculus, but just to establish the interval of applicability of calculus. Because right now we're just saying it applies to anything. It doesn't. Our reluctance to acknowledge where it doesn't correspond to reality has led to a problem in our understanding of physics.
Right.
It's causing errors to multiply and never be corrected.
So the idea behind disproving calculus you're referring to has more to do with calculus as a mathematical subject's applicability to analysis of the real world, as opposed to the field of calculus given its axioms and your ability to derive it. Is that the idea?
The idea is basically I want to get to the answer. So I don't really know if I've even thought about it on that deeper level to know which one of those two things it is. It's just I want what works. I kind of know why calculus failed. This is the uncertainty principle, right? Because what is a derivative, right? It's basically the same thing as delta x goes to 0, right? Which is delta p goes to infinity. Huh? It doesn't happen in real life, right? But did, that would be what happened. Does that any of that make sense or abstract?
Yeah, it's I mean, maybe the way of framing it is that it's like an analysis tool to try to get answers about certain mathematical objects, but not something that represents a physical process that occurs in reality.
Semi does, though. It semi does. It has things in common with quantum mechanical wave productions, right? Which is what makes it even more tough to work with. What is calculus? Its limits. What is the limit? The limit. You're saying like, well, I model the world as its limits, the union of its limit. Oh, you can't. On certain scales, it seems like you can. Space and time are essentially orthogonal in our experience. So sure, it makes sense to model them that way if it feels like that and no counter evidence. But then something like special relativity comes along and it's like, well, actually, space and time aren't independent. Darn. Who gives a shit? Still act like they do, even though we know special relativity is true. It's the same with this. It's like just a deeper understanding. It's not saying calculus is literally wrong. It's just that it doesn't accord with reality when you have effects. To reframe the notion of calculus to match what it actually is, right? If we instead of doing a calculus thing, we do like an observation thing where it's computing the measurement limit. We know that's finite, right? If I'm right.
Well, I mean, calculus is just like a descriptive tool.
It's not. It's an analytical tool. Descriptive thing is the graph. A graph is a description of a relation between two entities, one presupposed to be independent, the other presupposed to be dependent on the independent one. Right away, you have problematic assumptions. You can't presume null hypothesis. It's idiotic. Reasonable presumption is entanglement, i.e., connectedness. That the disconnectedness is on the end of the human making that distinction, not reality.
So you don't think that calculus solved like Zeno's paradox and
Oh, see, exactly. It's like, please don't take this as a me shitting on calculus thing. Not. Acknowledge all the good stuff about calculus. It's like saying, it's like you have an abusive husband, but he's rich. Nobody buys me nice clothes. It's like he's, beating you up. Not sure if that's a good metaphor here for this particular combo, but you get the idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying like we should get bogged down in calculus.
I'm just saying you have battered wife syndrome with calculus. If you get offended at the idea that calculus has a limited realm of applicability.
Oh, well, yeah.
Everywhere.
I think that applies to almost everything that it has. That you know what I mean? Like almost everything has like a limited applicability.
Not really. Well, yeah, maybe they do. Yeah, everything has limited applicability, but not everything has equal applicability. Some things have way more than others. That's what I'm after, basically, is what is the ideology with the greatest applicability? And then and make like a sandwich out of them. A multi-layered sandwich? That's what pantheism is.
That reminds me of Scooby-Doo. I don't know. That's what I thought of, but...
Yes, every day is like Scooby-Doo. And, the video game thing, the God mode. It's real. Just don't have any real or freedom with regards to the beliefs associated with that mode. And waveform reduces oneself into that mode. The mode is not revealed. That's the issue with this atheist combo is like, prove God exists. It's like, maybe we should just try to frame it a little different to make it a little more interesting. Maybe accept that proving God existence is outside of the domain of what you traditionally think of as proving things. It's too emotional. Anybody?
No, I mean I agree. I think like if somebody who's putting it forward, like if a theist is putting it forward and just says that like I kind of root this in my emotions and I believe in this thing, like I would never challenge that, you know. So
the point is not that they're rooting it in your emotions. The point is that everybody is, and for that reason, can't be dissuaded using reason. It's not just the theists who have emotional reasons for doing things.
Hey, anyone in the audience want to ask any more questions? Raise your hand. I'll let you guys in. Any questions at all? We can talk about Jen's sex life. I'm just playing, Jen. Don't be offended. And anyway, any questions? So go for it.
Do appreciate all the people tuning in. It doesn't look like anyone wants to join though. I hope it was an alright intro and people have a good impression of it. If you convert or whatever, like I basically, that's not that I don't want people to convert, but I definitely don't want people making me look bad by converting, trying to look cool by converting. It's like, no.
So Jen, what's your opinion on that, like classical theists, like the people that believe in like an actual deity or like a mind that created the universe? What's your opinion on people like that?
Primordial form of idolatry is personalism. Maladaptive anthropomorphism just arises due to the flawed nature of subjectivity, imperfect temporary nature of our existence. So I would say inevitable, sad, would like to assist and support people to move towards a state of personalism without vibe of like forcing them.
All right, strong atheist, go ahead. Any questions?
Yeah, I just was listening to you say that everyone decides things based on emotions, and I can't see as atheists do that. Can you explain that, please?
Everybody does things based on emotional reasons. Usually it's a desire to be perceived as intelligent. Also could be desire to conform. Those are emotional drives. Those the desire for knowledge. The desire to be perceived as intelligent and the desire for knowledge come from essentially different places. They'll have different profiles, even though adherents claim motivated by the same thing.
Okay, my opinion really is that theists base most of their stuff on emotions. Atheists base most of our stuff on logic and reason. Feelings and emotions are substantially different. I also believe that women tend to base things more on feelings and emotions, and men tend to base things more on logic and reason. There are exceptions.
Stuff on emotions, and then some people, what you call justifying or reasoning or rationalizing things to themselves. That's an ego-building exercise. Nothing to do with actually being truly understanding logic, objective or quasi-objective sense, and has to do with more of a problem-solving approach.
I believe it is what's.
Don't try to tell me men aren't driven by emotions. I mean, come on.
I don't believe that. I think you might not understand men enough or atheists enough. I think we're driven on logic and reason. Everyone has a combination of things, but it's what is dominant.
Talk to me right now.
Say again?
if that were true, you wouldn't give a shit to come in here and tell me I'm wrong. I mean, the fact that you've got to come in here and tell me I'm wrong is an emotional reaction.
No, I'm just trying to help you be aware of what atheists.
It is.
Of what you can say that all you want, but doesn't make it true. It's atheists. I'm trying to make you more aware of what atheists and men think. I think you're looking at it from a female theist position.
You're trying to teach me
I
something.
personally disagree with strong atheist, and I am a strong atheist.
I disagree as well.
So many times. Oh my god, it's hilarious.
Well, it has to do with your estrogen. Your estrogen makes you all having to do with emotions and feelings, and our testosterone makes us not go in that direction so much. And that's why I have a mostly male atheist theory that most atheists are mostly male because we make our decisions based most on logic and reason, whereas theists are generally more female who base their stuff more on emotion and that's really clear.
You're making a really strong argument to become a theist.
Your voice is literally wavering right now. My voice is not wavering.
You just said all women are theists
for anything whatsoever. How wavering someone's voice is.
It's certainly anecdotal.
You can try to make it like that.
Position that you're a nervous wreck, aka being emotional, and it's like
I am so scared talking to you.
You have emotions.
It's so scary talking to you.
I'm sure it is, and the fact that I'm a woman, it's like look in the mirror.
Okay. Any case, I'm at work. I'll get back on when I get home from work. I have a customer, but I'll get back on when I get back from work, and we can finish this if you're still here.
Oh no!
Will Jen be converting to atheism due to this wonderful dominating argument? Stay tuned.
I think that people who think emotion isn't a large component in their behavior and their choices and this type of thing don't have a lot of emotional intelligence.
Right. It's like they're just not paying attention to it.
Yeah, because they're probably not very well trained at identifying the emotions they're experiencing and noticing them.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that men and women are both pretty emotional, probably equally emotional. I mean, I don't even know how you quantify it. I think
men are more in tune with intuition. And
I mean, it must be so nice to just sort of to conceptualize yourself as this emotionless Spock-like character to to imbue on yourself some form of super rationality. But it's just so much of the psychology literature is showing that this is false for both men and women. It's because we're human.
You can become enlightened by your own intelligence. Come on a random Discord chat. Lose your cool in 5 minutes and then rage quit. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to presuppose, neutrality. Maybe we can be neutral, but we should axiomatize as sort of like a first assumption or whatever that emotions are a thing. Much of a thing are they? Well, probably quite a bit. I don't know what more we can really say than that, though.
I mean, I
think
it's
it's funny that this is the type of argument that's being made.
Like, there's definitely like times where like dispassion can be like a good thing in a sense, like a doctor or something like that, like trying to suppress like emotions so that they can like help people or that sort of thing. Like, I mean, but I don't think it's a good like way to act all the time. Like.
Yeah, and there's no comment about whether or not it's the case that when you notice yourself experiencing an emotion in a certain context, that it's a good thing to be aware of that and attempt to control it for your own like rational purposes or like, your particular goals. Because, we can actually make differences in how we behave on the basis of noticing what we're experiencing and attempting to sort of set it aside for some other greater purpose. But it's just, to me, it's fairly ignorant to think that emotion plays very little role in the atheist life with respect to how they evaluate their worldview.
Yeah, because I mean, even like in what we were just talking about, like a lot of those goals that you're setting, that you're saying like I want to be rational or like suppress certain emotional inclinations in a certain moment, that comes from a long-term goal that is also driven by like some kind of emotion, like a doctor saving people's lives. I mean, like it's because they think it's a good thing to help save somebody's life, and like that's driven by
A
emotions.
fucking
Like,
selfish asshole.
I mean, same thing with like, even if you're just like, oh, I need to work really hard this week so that I can save money. Usually, it has some kind of like motive towards like I want to be able to retire, and that has like an emotional connotation to it, where it's like, yeah, I don't want to work my whole life. Like that's not really like peak rationality. It's like I don't want to do that, like.
Anything that doesn't really affirm the self fundamentally is going to have some problems, I think. People are self-serving. To deny that is to sort of go in a rabbit hole that is not going to go anywhere good. I don't think. Self-destructive, I guess. Can't really help people if you're a bring pile of human wreckage. That's something like, did this atheist guy who just came on, was he actually trying to help me?
He likes to argue. He's come on a few times and I've argued with him, but
I think it was kind of like you're a woman, so I shouldn't value your opinion because you're emotional kind of trip.
I know he's into some of like the right wing stuff as well, but like some of the more hardline shit. So
Is it Soldier of Science? Is that the same guy? Sounds like him.
No.
Sometimes I get people confused. But Soldier of Science like called me a Karen the other day because I gave like a 5 to 7 minute explanation of extremely complicated metaphysical stuff. He's like, read up, Karen. It's like, dude, just call everything you don't like a Karen. That's going to do anything other than make Karen a crappy meme. Wasn't already. Probably the literal worst argument. Gotta just evaluate the arguments on their merits, right? And a lot of people aren't doing that. They're Socratic. They're going on a hunt for Socratic. What do they call them? Not inconsistencies, but fallacies. It's like how can you be so sure these things are fallacies? Able to point out fallacies presupposes knowledge. Why the hell would you presuppose knowledge? It's the worst thing to presuppose that you have. Because if you believe that you have something, you can't get more of it, or some of it in the case of knowledge, is it's only reasonable to really presuppose you have zero knowledge.
Yo, Frank, I have a sidebar. You should try to get pessimistic idealism to come into one of these. Even in like a face-off or something like that. That'd be pretty funny. Because he kept like massive threads going when this Discord first started. So
What is his name? Pessimistic idealism?
yeah.
Where is he at? Do you have like a Discord server he's in, or a link for him?
Yeah, I think he's in this one.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Should be able to add him.
All right, I'll look him up. Maybe do like Ask an Idealist or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be funny. Or you could do idealist versus pantheist or something like that.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll get Jen back on here and see if I should go toe to toe with an idealist.
I would say that it might be fun to like do some LARP debates, simple debates. It's not just going to be me absolutely steamrolling everybody. Is love real, so people can get a chance to prove their rhetoric. Debating's not very easy.
Jen, if you have any ideas of anything you want to do, I'd like to keep working with you. I like your ideas. So
thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm touched. Especially that it's an atheist type of place. I feel like it's a more tougher audience. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and you obviously know your stuff, and because me and Ethan we're talking about it, and I mean, I think we both kind of agree that, and he mentioned this, that you're you I don't know what the word he used. Maybe Ethan and I can come in. Like it's your I forget. But anyway, like basically like that you have a good stance, or like you're consistent. That's what he said. Consistent. Yeah. So
Well, that's heartwarming. Yeah, I really love being consistent.
yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for noticing.
All right, guys.
Yeah, if we guys want to wrap it up, that's been. I think we've been probably at it for a couple hours. That was
Yeah, we've
very
been at
fun.
this for 2 hours. I'm recording this, by the way, Jen. So if you want to look back and see it, it's on T-Jump's Discord recordings on YouTube. And so thank you for coming in, guys. And I'm gonna close this out. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care until next time.
No problem.
Thank you, Cam. Bye, guys.
No problem. Nice to talk with you all.
Great to meet you, Cam, and nice to talk to you again. They're friends who I've already met.